Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, maybe a bit irrational Seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into the controversial topics that some may call New Age, or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And hopefully look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers.
On this minisode, we're going to be answering the slightly leading question, are flotation tanks overrated?
If you're wondering if you should spend £65 to lie in the salty, watery coffin, this is the episode for you.
It seems like you might have a few strong feelings about this.
I do! But before we get into that, remember that if you have a question you'd like us to answer, you can contact us via Twitter @SeekerSkeptic or email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com.
So I guess first we should explain what flotation tanks are. Watery coffins is a bit of a harsh way to describe it.
Salty watery coffins.
They're basically large plastic baths with a soundproof lid. And the whole idea is when you're in there, you have complete sensory deprivation. So there's no light because the lid is also lightproof. There's no sound because it's soundproof. And you've got 10 inches of water there heated to body temperature. And it's just chock full of Epsom salts. So it's like really, really easy. There's no effort at all to float. You just lie on the water. I guess it's a bit like being in the Dead Sea or something. They were invented in the 50s by a guy called John Lilly, who's a friend of Stanislav Grof, who invented holotropic breathing, which you might remember from our first ever episode. Also friends with several dolphins, this guy, who's big into dolphin communication. I don't know if he ever brought them in the tanks with him. That I couldn't find out with my brief research.
They gave him the idea.
So that it sort of became a thing in the 70s. Well, in the 50s he invented it, and then it didn't really pick up until the 70s. There's all these people like exploring consciousness, basically. That was the whole idea. But how it came, like how I became aware of it was The Simpsons. Do you remember that episode?
Yes, great episode. So Lisa and Homer are kind of arguing, and Lisa gets really stressed out. The episode starts really well, and they go to a flotation tank. Yeah,
he's like, I'll do something for you, like I'll do something, one of your activities, instead of always going to do the things that I like. So that's what she chooses. And the first question Homer Simpson asks is, can you pee in it? Which I think is good. Is it
my favourite bit that...
I can't remember if there are actually rules about peeing in flotation tanks. Presumably they flush them out in between uses. Yeah,
I mean, you're encouraged to empty yourself out before you go in, which I think is like the unwritten rule. Like it's like kind of obvious. But yeah, you can't help but wonder what's going on in there. And no, I just remember that a bit in that Simpsons episode. Sorry, digression. But Homer's like fantasizing about all of these different types of bacon. Like that's what he sees.
I actually rewatched the clip, and that's not Homer, that's Lisa. Because what she does is, as soon as she gets into the flotation tank, she starts jumping into the bodies of other members of her family. First she goes into the cat, and the last body she jumps into is Homer's body, and that's when she sees the vision of the bacon. It's so weird. It's like instant for her. There's this great...
Yeah.
Before they get in, just before the lids are closed, I don't think she has a name, the woman who runs the flotation center, so I just call her hippie lady because that's what Homer calls her. She says, "You're about to take a journey into the mind. You may see and experience things that are strange or frightening, but remember, they can't physically harm you, though they may destroy you mentally." And then she closes the lids. It's amazing. So I had pretty high expectations for flotation tanks. I thought it was like going to be immediate visions, which, I mean, spoiler alert, maybe not. So a low-end tank costs around $10,000. I had a quick look on eBay, and you can get a used one for £4,900 at the moment. Although I guess you'd have to put like special floor in. I don't think you can just chuck that in your bathroom. I don't know.
Surely it's just like a bath.
Yeah, maybe you can have it in the garden. I don't know. There was a picture of it on like a deck on the... I mean, it's a large bath, so I guess it's much bigger than a bath because it sort of has to have that big lid over the top, and you need enough space so you can move around comfortably. I don't know how many people actually have these in their homes.
The Simpsons made me think that it was like really coffin shaped, but I think most of them now are bigger. They're more like a hot tub size.
Yeah.
Isn't that?
Yeah, they're pretty big.
Pretty big.
And the original ones that John Lilly made, you like stood up in them. They're all vertical.
Yes, and there's that. Have you seen that film Altered State?
I watched it last night. It was amazing.
No way! It's a great film. Yeah. So I mean, if there's one takeaway from this episode, it's definitely watch that Simpsons episode and watch Altered State.
Yeah, we'll put links in the show notes so you can find those. But what are they actually supposed to do? The flotation tanks.
So I mean, other than the claims that you might have heard on, people talk about, which is, you'll hallucinate. This is like a trip. It's like consciousness altering just by being in this kind of sensory deprivation state. Other things that I heard are floating offers you 8 hours worth of sleep in 2 hours.
Whoa, that's a big claim.
That's disproved. There is no scientific backing for any of the following things, by the way. Floating will remove toxins from your cells.
Oh.
So some people think that, it's going to be detoxing in some way. Improved mental abilities. That is one thing that this particular site, which is both being skeptical about certain claims, but also trying to tell us what the benefits are. And they do say that improved creativity has been something that's been shown.
Ooh,
so
that sounds a bit suspicious.
Yeah, well, in a test with 5 researchers over a 6-month period, they found that after floating, the researchers were able to come up with more creative ideas.
What, 5 people?
5 researchers. Well, they were researchers. In a test with 40 subjects, a standardized test used to measure creativity showed consistent large improvements in the group that floated versus the control. I mean, you can have a look at these.
It would be interesting to look into, but I'm always really dubious about anything that talks about creativity and measuring creativity, because I feel like it's such a vague term.
I totally agree, and I think the tests that they do for creativity, they're only usually testing divergent thinking. So like coming up with multiple uses for a pencil, which that is only some of creativity.
Oh, I see those, it's like, how many uses can you think of for X? I think you could say that's testing creativity, but you could also say it's testing like just how long people are bothered to do it for. Like, because I'd just be like 3, and then I'd just get up and leave, because it's boring. I don't want to,
Well, we could have a whole episode about creativity, because, we could be skeptical about that too. Floating is an addiction treatment, which is wild. They think it's going to help people stop smoking. That has not been replicated.
Well, apparently John Lennon claims it helped him quit heroin. So there you go. That's science.
I mean, you'll experience increased theta brainwave activity while floating. And if you've listened to any of our meditation episode, I think Rebecca goes into good depth about I think that episode's
coming out soon.
Bollocks around, all the stuff around different brain states. That's not. There isn't really great research done on that.
Not super legit, let's just say.
Yeah. But things that, like, there have been studies. So physical recovery, and I think this has a lot to do with magnesium absorption, because the salts that are used are really rich in magnesium. And chronic pain, apparently. So you're not going to solve your fibromyalgia or whatever else you have, but it can be drastically reduced.
That's interesting. I don't know about the magnesium absorption. I have to look into that, because again, that raises alarm bells. But I can definitely see, if you're physically uncomfortable because you have some kind of chronic condition, having a nice lie down in basically a state of the art bath, that's going to make you feel better, right? Obviously.
Magnesium is I think magnesium is pretty well researched, especially when it comes to muscle relaxant.
Oh, yeah.
It really is.
I've never heard anything about it. So
it's my favourite mineral of choice.
Cat's top minerals.
Yeah.
What's your second favourite mineral?
Boron.
Good choice. Gotta love a bit of boron.
Stress reduction and improved mental health. So, there is some kind of people record feeling less stressed after lying in a bath for an hour, which isn't really surprising.
Yeah, not super surprising.
So, those are some of the claims, some of the myths. I want to hear about your experience
Yeah, so I
both.
went to this years ago, just because I thought it sounded really relaxing. I was living in London at the time, and it was just, I mean, you know what living in London's like. Anyone who's ever lived in a city knows what living in London is like. It's dirty, it's loud, it's stressful, just people everywhere. Ugh, nightmare. So I was feeling pretty stressed, so I thought the perfect thing to do would to be go and have a nice bath. I don't think I even had a bath in my apartment at the time, so this was like an opportunity to do some personal hygiene and also relax, which is really nice. So I went in there. I don't remember them making any claims, any of the things you just said, apart from relaxation, but I think it was kind of like, it's one of those situations where they let the internet and word of mouth make the claims for them, like lots of these things they do.
I mean, but by the time you're there and you've paid your 50, 60, 70 quid to do it, they assume that they don't need to sell you on it.
Yeah.
You know, that's not what they're there to do.
Exactly. It was very nice. Like, it was very clean and everything was very, like, professional, and they had dressing gowns, like nice big fluffy dressing gowns for you to use. And you had a room the size of a very large bathroom with a shower in it and maybe a loo. I can't remember. There might have been a loo. And the pod itself, but you had the whole room, because in the Simpsons episode it's just like these two watery coffins next to each other in a basement. Yeah, that anyone could just walk in and out of, which makes you feel a bit exposed. But this, you had your own private like suite basically, which was really nice. And they had a little tub of Vaseline for you to put on any wounds, because obviously the water's very salty, so if you have a little nick anywhere on your body, the salt's going to get in there and make it sting like a motherfucker. But I'd shaved my legs fairly recently, so like I have abrasions all over my legs. Basically, that's what shaving does. So as soon as I got in there,
what are you shaving with, like a
rusty razor? Yeah, no, but not like bleeding, not like lots of blood coming out or anything. Just tiny little abrasions, you know?
Yes.
No, does this not happen to you?
Okay, no, it probably does.
Maybe you need to give me some tips. But anyway, so there was no way I could put Vaseline over my whole legs, and I didn't even think to, because I wasn't aware until I got into this bathtub full of salty water that I was doing such a poor job on shaving my legs. I didn't know I had all these little wounds until the salt went in there and made them sting. Oh my God, it was the worst. But weirdly, I think very quickly the pain went away, or I just got used to it. I'm quite good at enduring discomfort, as you may know from other episodes. So it was very unpleasant. And I say, if any listeners are thinking about doing this, do not shave your legs or any part of your body for like a week at least beforehand, just to be safe. Or
like slap some Vaseline on your entire shaved body.
yeah, shave your entire body and then cover yourself entirely in Vaseline. Then you'll be fine. And beautiful and smooth. But yeah, so the lid, you close the lid, and because I was just in there on my own, there's a button to close it yourself. And then there was like, I think there was like a little very dim ambient light and some music. And the idea is that it plays you music for the first 5 minutes. You're in there for an hour, at least at this place. And the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes, they play like plinky plonky hippie music to sort of ease you in and ease you out. And then you just lie there in the dark. And it is like, I mean, it's just a place to meditate. That's what I saw it as. That's what I did in there. I didn't know visions came forward for me. I had a few thoughts. I can't remember them now, though, so they can't have been that profound. But I had a few thoughts. The main problem for me was when I got out and left, I was still in London. So any relaxation benefits I had from being in this nice environment were immediately gone because I had to get the tube home. So
this is funny. I've heard about this. This is very similar experience with me my first time, and somebody who's based in the States just told me their problem was where the place was located, that traveling to it and getting back from it almost undid all of the work. So I think that's a kind of common experience with people.
I guess it depends how much relaxation because my husband loves these things. He's been back several times. He really likes flotation tanks. I think if we ever became rich, he'd consider buying one. But he also does take a lot of baths. I don't really take baths either.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, me neither.
I just find them boring. But he loves baths and he loves flotation tanks, and he thinks it's worth it. He thinks he gets enough relaxation in the tank to make the journey home afterwards worth it. But for me, definitely not. Because it's like, it's not only, I mean, the tube is stressful enough in London, but you're kind of, because you're so relaxed, going out into that, it feels more intense. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. So have you been back since? That was the only
Yeah, I
time?
went back once. The first time I went with a friend, and the second time I went to take my husband because I thought he'd like it, which I was right, and he's continued to go every so often. I think he's only been like 4 times. But in times of, high work stress, he's like, I'm going to go and book myself a flotation sort of thing. But yeah, that's
Treat
it.
yourself.
Where did you go? Did you go to one in London too?
I did. My one was in sort of near, like, I want to say Tower Bridge, like really arse end of nowhere. In terms of like, it's not like central London. You have to travel a fair bit. I was hungover. It was the morning. I was really stressed. Like, I can't remember what else had happened that morning, but I know that I was like not in a good place. Having said that, it was probably my favorite float, possibly out of all of them, in terms of like, it was a new experience and it did feel relaxing at the time. But yeah, it was all undone as I left the place. Exactly the same as how you've described. It is quite like a nice environment. But yeah, it was, the environment around it was not. One thing I'll say is that this is the only one that I've done in the morning. And for me, that's the best time to do it. It makes a big difference because I was kind of still like I wasn't fresh because I was hungover, but like I hadn't like started my day properly. I just went straight there, which I do recommend. The next time I went, it was in Brighton. So it was a less stressful place to go. So listeners, Brighton is kind of a nice city by the sea in the UK. And I was definitely less stressed. This is the afternoon. So it was it felt a bit of a weird time of day to go, like bang in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Problems where I didn't use earplugs, so got very salty ears.
Oh
and
yeah, I
that's
forgot
really
about the
annoying.
earplugs.
Yeah, the ears problem it's a big problem. Like the sensation afterwards, because you don't really care at the time. It's kind of like just being in a swimming pool. You just think, okay, water in my ears, no big deal. But when the salt dries, be prepared to have like clicky, gritty ears for at least a week afterwards.
So did they
really
not provide
not
earplugs, or did you just not use them?
I didn't see them until I left.
Oh no.
Yeah. But the other thing I did, I had a massage afterwards at the same place. And that was by far more relaxing and beneficial, I think, than the flotation tank.
Oh, interesting.
I couldn't tell, but I felt more different after that. And then the final one that I've done was also in Brighton. And this was on the seafront, just a very quick walk down from my house. Really, really lovely place. So there was like very minimal stress to do with the journey. And probably the nicest environment out of the 3. I did it in the evening, so I went to bed straight away afterwards, which, I mean, that's probably second to the morning. I think either do it in the morning or the evening before bed. This time I did use the bloody earplugs, but I still got water inside them.
Oh no.
And I still had that salty problem. And I think because it was the evening, I had even more stuff going around in my head. So I really did spend the whole time thinking. I am capable of spending like long periods of time in meditation just thinking.
Yeah.
I'm not actually meditating. So yeah, I think, yeah. So none of them were a hit.
I think, I don't know. I think maybe like if you're the sort of person who feels very, very overstimulated all the time, like, I mean, a lot of people complain about that, right? Like, especially in our modern technological world, like all this stuff being thrown at them, being in a dark, completely, I mean, they say it's isolation, like complete sensory deprivation, but it's not real. I mean, it is dramatically less sensory information than you'd have normally. But I mean...
But you still feel like the drippy drops and the condensation, it's still like...
Exactly.
You can tell that you're in water.
Yeah, it would be interesting if you could literally have complete sensory deprivation. I would go for that. I think that would be an interesting experience. But this is just like sensory minimization, I guess.
Yes, that's a good point.
So... I don't know, what watching Altered States last night made me think maybe this is better with drugs.
Okay, yes. I think, because I have first heard about float tanks from the amazing Joe Rogan.
Oh, I think everyone has. Yeah, he's really done a lot for the flotation tank industry.
Exactly. And I think he either gets very high before going in, yeah, so I think that's really the way to do it.
Although then you run the risk of turning into a caveman, like William Hurt did in that movie. Because if people haven't, I mean, that's a spoiler for the movie, but it did come out in like the 80s. So he basically goes, I think he takes, actually, he drinks what looks suspiciously to me like ayahuasca. and then he goes in the float tank.
Yeah.
Which I can't imagine anything worse. Can you imagine? Because you would vomit. I mean, sorry, listeners, but it's the reality of ayahuasca. You'd be puking into that water. We would be the last of your concerns.
Yeah, or it would be like just what you need. Maybe it would be a good thing to do towards the end of a trip.
I think it sounds very, very risky.
I'm going to ask in my ayahuasca Facebook group.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. So he takes what looks suspiciously like ayahuasca, and then he has he regresses into a past life, which we're actually going to talk about in the podcast in the future, in where he's like a caveman, and then because he's in his past life, he starts manifesting physically the attributes of a caveman, and then they open up the flotation tank, and he just goes berserk, like a caveman would.
It is kind of fun. I think there's something therapeutic about even watching that film.
Yeah.
I think we could... Or is it just me who wants to act like a caveman?
Well, it's the classic Jekyll and Hyde werewolf thing, isn't it? Yes. It's like the other side of you, or your primal urges being kind of giving them permission to be released. But that was not advertised at the flotation centre I went to. And they should have had a warning video. By the way, you might turn into a caveman.
I think we should start one, a float centre, and actually make it good. Yes.
So what do you think? Would you recommend this to people, or are you strongly against?
I think I've got mixed opinions. I think if you happen to be a solid meditator already or high, you could have a really great experience with float tanks. I also think that, and like you said, your husband already enjoys baths.
Yeah.
I think if you're you like a bath, this is like having a souped up bath.
Yeah.
So definitely good. I do believe in the benefits of magnesium, and the thing is, if you buy a load of Epsom salts, you can turn your own bath into one of these. You won't float, but you'll get the benefits of the magnesium. So I do recommend just bathing more. I think baths are good. And it is just more proof for me that our minds are all different, and that some of us need a lot more extra help, and even, to kind of quieten them down. And for me, a bath doesn't cut it, especially not like an expensive bath. I'd rather spend that money on drugs, basically.
What drugs do you reckon would be best to go into a float tank with?
I think just some weed.
Just weed, fine. Yeah, to start with maybe, and then work up to LSD.
And if you were, or mushrooms, I think if you were comfortable.
I don't know, because I still get a bit nauseous on mushrooms.
Oh yeah, the motion sickness might not be so fun. Yeah,
especially if you're in, because in the Simpsons episode, Homer's thing, his tank gets moved around, it gets repossessed by someone, like a repo man comes and repossesses the tank whilst he's inside it, so it's all sloshing around. He gets quite excited about it. Yeah. He's like, oh, now it's started to kick in. It really is a great episode. Yes. So if that happened and you're on mushrooms, not fun. But I think it's unlikely to happen.
Yeah, and what about you? Do you? I mean, one thing I will say is I do recommend everyone trying it once, because you don't know, you might be one of those people who just really takes to it, like a duck in water, as they would say.
Yeah, I think it's worth a go, especially if you can get one of those they often seem to have 2-for-1 deals on these places. So if you can, because I think £65 is a bit steep, because that's a lot of money for an hour, right?
Yeah, you can get several massages for that.
Exactly.
Depending on where you are in the world.
But yeah, I think it's worth a go, as long as you remember not to shave, and come in with
use good earplugs.
Yes, and come in with low expectations. So realise this is just going to be like a quiet, dark bath. I think if you expect to have visions, you're going to be disappointed, because I mean, you might daydream. Everyone daydreams, but there's nothing particularly special about it, or nothing that I experienced that was outside what I normally experience, just meditating, lying on my sofa.
Yeah, exactly.
I was really expecting you to be every time flotation tanks have come up in conversation, you've been like, oh, they're the worst. So I was expecting you to be much more grumpy about it.
Well, when I thought back about my experiences, it's not like they were super negative. But yeah, definitely overrated. I mean, it's got my overrated stamp of approval on it, or disapproval. My stamp of disapproval.
Stamp of disapproval. Okay, so do you feel better now you've got all that off your chest?
Yes, and I'm glad that I will never have to do one of those things again.
Maybe we just save someone 65 quid.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd really love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And if you're interested, you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at yoga_astrology on Twitter. And you can find me exploring the intersection of yoga and astrology at yogaandastrology.com.
If you liked what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store or wherever you're listening.
Or just tell somebody you know about the show. Thanks for listening.